the model I have looks at the past, present, and in the future I call about possibility. And the past is where our stories live. The, the present is where we can get clear about what's important, and the possibility is where our ideas live. And our ideas are things that we can add value or make a difference, and they become our future, our future present. I think that the big thing is that to know, and it's probably one of the hardest things that when we're creating something, and looking for the future, it's not going to change who we are, So, it's we're still going to be the same person. And I think so often when I'm in the future, I'm going to be a better artist or a better writer. It's not going to change the essence of who I am. And I think that's a mistake that we make, and I think that if you see people that have had great successes, which because it's all transient, but it doesn't fulfill. Um, and so I think that if we're looking to the act of creativity to somehow think it's going to make us a better person, then that's ill-founded. We need to enjoy it for the sheer joy of doing it, knowing that whatever we create, it's not going to, we're still going to be the same person. We're still going to have the same insecurities. We can still all that stuff like that. It's not going to change us. And I think that's really important because I think in so many people, especially with the proliferation of social media, we see other people that have these successes and their life appears to be different. But as
Right.
you know, you've obviously talked to a lot of people on your podcast. We're all still the same.
Yeah, yeah.
We're just ordinary people that maybe can do extraordinary things.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Heart Talk, coming to you from Kota Kinabalu in Sabah in Malaysia. Now, this is my opening statement. The human brain contains billions of neurons. And the fascinating thing is that they are massively interconnected and they provide the ability to change. Neuroplasticity. Now, one of the most commonest words that you hear in the marketplace is the word creativity. We talk about, it's either a prefix or a postfix, creative living, creative thinking, creative marketing. Everything is about creativity. But do we really know the meaning of it and how it applies to life? I'm particularly interested in creativity in respect to the well-being and longevity. That's my angle. And so it's so important that we understand how do we keep the creative process in our minds alive so that we are always at the cutting edge for prosperity. Now, I always talk about the chi transformation factor, which is, I believe, the three most important elements to prevent burning out or burnout and mental exhaustion. Chi, C for creativity, which I believe is the currency of the 21st century. There is no one particular place in the brain that just, is just controlling creativity. I believe it's the whole brain, interconnected by large networks that keep that creativity a spark alive. Now, the H is hope. So, hope is the currency of the future in the present. So when you have creativity, which is keeping us alive in the present and helping us to become more innovative, productive, and you have hope, and hope is in the future, together, they produce what is called innovation. Because innovation is the engine for growth. Now, to understand the whole dynamics of creativity, from the brilliant strokes of a painter's brush to the innovative leaps of an entrepreneur, to understand the whole philosophy and the embryology of creativity in this world that we are in, I have with me today a guru of this fascinating element of creativity. His name is Paul Fairweather. Comes to us live from Brisbane, and he's the co-founder of the Common Creative Podcast. So join me to welcome Paul as we learn more about this fascinating world of creativity. Hi, Paul. Welcome to HEARTtalk.
I'm pleased to be here, Charles. We're looking forward
It's been like 2 years in the setting. It was a long surgical process, man.
better be good, hey?
Yeah, I've been reading your articles and delighted to have you joining us. So now I want to start off this conversation with you, Paul, because HEARTtalk is more of a conversation as opposed to an interview.
Yep.
And now, look, you've already put your artistic creativity into the process. What are you doing down there? You keep looking down.
So
What do you got?
I've been drawing you as we go.
Hey, do me a favor, put some hair on the top of it.
If I could do that, I would have done the same for me.
Yeah. Listen, Paul, in my introduction, I mentioned you as the guru of creativity. And I'm just delighted to have you join us because I believe that creativity is the currency of the 21st century. And it's very unfortunate that they're using the word as a prefix and a postfix for everything under the sun. We talk about creative living, creative thinking, creative marketing. Just put it there. It'll be on the tombstone next, they tell you. But I thought we'd start this conversation with something that's deep to you, and that is the whole creative process. Yeah. Because many people have come to it at different angles, and I think it's still an inexact science. So I look at creativity as the currency of the 21st century, and it's certainly a currency of the whole brain. I feel that it doesn't just locate into one particular part of the brain, but the whole brain is interlocking, it's flowing in a flow state. And the whole set of it is in what we call creativity today. And I think that, the idea of what is creativity and what is the process that we think about it, and it all starts with an idea. You take it into the marketplace, and then this idea, you bring it out and you make it happen, you make it work, you take it to the world, and then you see whether it's going to have any value to it. So I want your thoughts, because I was reading your whole concept of creativity ions. And then I thought that was a brilliant way, because I do a lot of ion transfer in my practice. As a plastic surgeon, a lot of transdermal transfer of ions. And you're talking about transneural transfer of ideas that go through so many processes. So talk to me about, or talk to all of us about these 6 steps that you really talk about in your creativity ions. Let's just start there.
Okay, let's start there. And I'd like to come back to some of the other things that you touched on around, what's happening in the brain, because there's some great, studies and research that's. But yeah, so I sort of had this idea around, this whole idea of a ionic bond. Now, I didn't do chemistry at school, but I read this fantastic book quite a few years ago by Natalie Angiers called The Canon, a whirligig tour of the beautiful world of science. And in that book, she basically explains science from atomic level all the way through to molecular biology, and then genetic biology, and then geology, and then the stars, and how it's all sort of a linking. And this whole idea about a new idea is really the combination of 2 existing ideas. And so we all try to do these things, and the six steps that I break it down to are around exploration, inspiration, curation, action, and then expression,
and gratification.
Yeah, and sorry,
and gratification at the end.
And gratification at the end, which loops back to the start.
Right.
The thing is that, and this idea that we're always looking for that positive aspect of those things. But the reality is that it doesn't always work that way. And so there's always two sides to the coin, the yin and yang of creativity. And so just like table salt is a combination of two ions, sodium and chloride, they come together and they create table salt. Sodium is quite highly reactive. Chloride is highly poison, in its other state,
Right.
not ionic state. Yet they come together, to give literally, the salt of the earth that we rely on. And the same thing with creativity. And so, for instance, we have this whole idea of inspiration, and it's a joint thing between the imagination and distraction, because you can't always stay in a state of inspiration or always in a
Absolutely.
state of positive imagination. We all get distracted. Now, sometimes, and so that's just a fact of life. Sometimes we use that distraction to find inspiration. But the problem is that if we stay in distraction too long, then what happens is that will then turn into an addiction. So
Yeah.
I say I'm going to be distracted. I'm going to go on to the internet, to find some ideas, and then before long I'm doom scrolling, and so
Yeah.
I'm addicted to that now. And so that's the thing. And if you skip over, to the next main one, which is action, it's the thing about motivation and procrastination. Um, and if we basically stay too long in procrastination, then we end up in stagnation. We can't go forward. We don't have that momentum. So it's this balance between, because we all procrastinate, and it's probably not the technical definition of procrastination, which is we delay although we know that we'll be worse off when we delay. This is more of a distraction. It's more like a furthering of the distraction state. So we sometimes have to procrastinate for various reasons. And also, I think that one of my favorite quotes comes from Sarah Brethner, which is, the world needs dreamers and the world needs doers, but what the world really needs are dreamers that do. So we have this thing about, sometimes we're thinking and sometimes we're doing. When we're action man and doing things, sometimes we've got to stop and let things incubate, and incubation is probably another stage, and I could probably keep on going to these
Yeah.
stages to 20. But, in that action thing, sometimes we have to, there's iteration, we have to iterate. But the main point is this thing about a balance. We can't always be in a state of action or always be motivated. And if you skip, further to um, probably, in my mind, one of the most important, which is around expression. And we have this, the wanting to get ourselves out there to be seen and heard, but it comes with trepidation. Um,
Yes.
and that trepidation comes in right from the start. As soon as we've got an idea, fear kicks in, because we're afraid of new ideas, because we're afraid of things that are new. You would know, as a doctor, what's going on there. But so it's this whole thing about this balance between the two things, and just knowing that there is no perfect creative process, and you got to take the good with the bad to get it in the middle, but you got to keep it balanced. And because if you stay fearful too long, then you basically get isolated. You withdraw,
Excuse me.
and the fear overcomes you, and you basically can't put things into the world. And then the very last one is really about gratification, and that's gratification for yourself, that you've gone through this process. But even more importantly, it's gratification of an audience or a customer. And then once you're at that stage, that leads back to that thing of exploration and curiosity, which, the initial one, which I did skip over, which is about, exploration, or is really this balance of things that we observe, observation, and things that annoy us. I can't think what my word is, but that's that balance, that things that we go, that disturbs me. I need to fix something about it.
Yeah.
So that's it in a nutshell, Charles.
Yeah, and that's interesting. It's fascinating because when you put it into that kind of a loop, right? I mean, all the different steps are interlocking in the same time, or is that just a flow state of mind?
Well, look, the thing is that I have a graphic for creativity, and it's this sort of series of circles and dots that's all linked, and like a very complex atom. The reality is that creativity is not linear,
Yeah.
and it's always constant looping. I heard a podcast this morning, an Australian author, Richard Flanagan, who talked about a letter that he got from an Indigenous lady, who said that this particular group or peoples had a fourth dimension. I don't know if this is something, I've only just heard it today, but to answer your question, he said that they have, what she said in this essay, they have a fourth dimension of time. They have the past, they have the present, and they have the future, but they also have a state which is the past, the present, the future all together as one thing.
Right.
So it's a little bit like that movie that won all the Oscars, everything all together all at the same time. Um, so, there are certain steps you've got to do, but it's very difficult, to string it out and say that it is a simple linear process. It doesn't really work that way, but you
Yep.
still got to go through the steps. You've got to basically, oh, again, one that I skipped over was curation, because at some stage you've got to go, okay, I've got all these ideas. I can't do, I can do any of them, but I can't do all of them. Which one am I going to pursue? Now, as you actually get into the action and start doing it, it might fail, or it might not work, and you go back again to another idea. But
Yeah.
yeah, creativity. I think it's the point you spoke earlier about the brain. It's not linear, although
Yeah.
it is a process. You've got to go through like anything. But it's probably more linked depending on what you do. So we're talking here sort of theoretically about a process. So if I'm doing a painting,
Right.
well then I've got to find, what am I noticing? What's my inspiration? Okay, curate, do some work, put it out in the world, and then either be dissatisfied or satisfied, and
No,
then
I mean, yeah, there's a great point there because you talked about expression, and I think that point of trepidation, where you worry about a negative comment, and
yeah,
that
yeah.
can slip you into procrastination. You know what I mean?
Oh
I
no,
don't
no,
want to take that again.
not exactly. But I use the thing of painting because as a kid, I used to drive my mother crazy because I used to paint a lot as a kid, but I'd say, Mum, I don't know what to paint. Tell me what to paint. Don't know what to paint. And now, if I'm painting for a show, if I say I booked a show in, which I haven't done for a few years, but I would just start. I'll have no idea, and so I'll start one painting, and by the time I finish that one painting, I have gone. Probably have a list beside my easel. I have 10 paintings because that action, that I'm doing puts us into a different brain state, which I wanted to talk about,
Right.
which allows me then, to expand my brain and other things come up. And
Right.
so, which is really taking me all the way back to the observation, imagination, inspiration phase, although I'm in the action. And while
Yeah.
I'm doing that, I'm also, if it's not going well, I start thinking, oh shit, maybe people won't like this.
Right. Right.
So yeah, so they are all interlinked. But I did want to talk about the brain, the creative brain, because it does lead into some of those things if you wanted to hear about it.
Yeah. Sure. Because yeah, let's go there because I was reading this article about the whole concept of large networks, neural networks.
Correct. Yeah.
And these networks come into play depending upon and they communicate between the outside world and the inner world of your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
And once that communication is going on, you're all the time on a positive mode,
Yeah.
alert when the negativity or the inner critic comes up.
Correct.
And yeah, so go ahead, should on that.
So there used to be the idea of the left and right hand brain.
Yeah.
Okay. The left was the analytical and the right was the creative. But since the advent of the fMRI machines, they
Right.
discovered that they're actually not left and right hemispheres, but networks, neural
Yeah.
networks. And they've discovered in all people, but particularly highly creative people, they particularly use these three networks in a specific way.
Yes.
So, and they discovered it because they were doing exercises in these fMRI machines, and they tell people to rest. And when they rested, they noticed that there was always the same pattern. And
Right.
so they realized that what they thought would be almost like a flat screen was actually this wet network. So the current studies, and the guy that was involved with a guy called Roger Beatty from Princeton, he's actually been a guest on our podcast, The Common Creative.
Right.
They found that there's three networks. The first network is called the default node network, and the default mode network is effectively the network that you use when you're doing nothing, and it's really actually when you're daydreaming is sort of the
Right.
best. I'm going to come back to that. The second network is the executive control network, effectively the old left-hand side of the brain, and it is where all the analytical stuff happens. It makes practical decisions, more in the prefrontal cortex of analyzing and making decisions. But what the magic comes from, and you talked about, the internal, intrinsic, and extrinsic, is the third network, which is the salient network. And as
Yeah.
you know, it's salient mean what's important, what's salient. But the salient network has two jobs. One is it's a filter for what's important for these other two networks to pay attention to, and then it also acts as a switching mechanism to allow the brain to switch almost simultaneously between the two. So what they found in highly creative people, and when I talk about highly creative people, what we're talking about here is people that, are not just the dreamers, but are dreamers that do, is that their brains switch constantly between the two at a
Right.
very rapid rate. So
Right.
they're doing the dreaming and then they're sort of analyzing it practical back to an idea and they're back and forth. So, and in a way, when I'm doing that painting and there's ideas are coming up, that's what's going on. I was when I had a large architectural practice, and when I had that practice, I used to doodle and draw like I was doing before, but I'm not now because I've got to look at you and the camera and the and our audience.
Right.
And people that knew me just ignored me. And when I was doodling, what I was doing is I was drawing things. So I was drawing coffee cups or my phone or a set of keys or someone else across the room. And but at any time, someone could ask me a question and I could answer it, or I could ask a pertinent question of the group. So what I was effectively doing, what I've realized now, what was doing in those days, was accessing those three networks. So the drawing was allowing me, my creative side, to access the default mode network, which allowed space for me through the salient network to pay attention to what was being said and
Right.
talked about. But I wasn't really aware of doing either, but I was doing both better than I would normally do. So I do really good drawings, and I was listening at a higher level than I would normally do if I was just sitting there and not to be able to draw.
Right.
So I think it's very interesting, that this whole idea that it's this holistic thing, and it doesn't even tap into some of those other things you're talking about, emotions and whatever. But those three networks basically shape. And so when I do some of my, master classes, I always get people to draw. And I tell that story about doodling, but I explain to people that it's a great way of accessing the stuff that you can then use in a practical application in your life or work. Because the brain doesn't understand if you're doing, the difference between doing a drawing or, you know, building a bridge. It's you're doing the same process and it's much easier. It's like a simulation of way. There's
Yeah.
another ION word. I'll have to add simulation in there somewhere at a future model.
That's right. Now, what if they are not artistic in their talent? I mean, how does that mop in?
Well, so we're all creative.
Yeah, that I agree. I mean, everyone is. It's a
And
universal currency.
it is, and there's interesting, a really great little tool that everyone can access. It's free, Adobe Creative Types, and it's good fun. It's got great motion graphics, and it's really cool. And it has 10 types.
Right.
So the great, and I often use it in my workshops as a sort of a warm up, ask people to do it, because there's no 11th type that says I'm not creative, or as people say, I don't have a creative bone in the body. It's 10 different types of creative person, so everyone's creative. I think that what I talk about is in when I talk about creativity, I start with this idea that based on quote from attributed to Einstein, but I read recently it might have been someone St. George, not Saint George, but someone called St. George, that basically creativity is seeing what everyone else has seen, but thinking what no one else has thought. Okay.
Right.
And in my masterclasses and keynotes, I have two images. One is of
Excuse
Van
me.
Gogh's Starry Night in a very famous painting. Uh, and the other is of the Hubble telescope photo of the stars. And when I put those two together, it's almost they blend into one. Um,
Right.
and so all the swirls, in the universe. And so it begs the question, what did Van Gogh see or think that no one else did? Okay. So that's the first sort of premise. The second one comes from a quote from a guy called David Brooks, who wrote a book, How to Know a Person Well. And in that book, he made this statement that just jumped out of me. You know, when you sometimes read a book and you have a line, and the
Yeah.
line said, to know someone well is an act of deep creativity.
Right.
Now, in the book, he unpacks it a little bit differently to I do. But what I saw in that statement was really an extension of Einstein's quote, was that to see someone well, we must look past our prejudgments, our bias, and our first impression. And to see someone really well, what we need to do is the subject of our gaze needs to have the trust to be able to drop their masks so we can see them better. So it comes to this thing that you were talking, about the, brains, about this connection, external connection.
Yes.
So we have this thing about creativity, is that's the essence of creativity. To jump over to creativity is misunderstood. It's misunderstood because people think it's artistry in the first instance. And the reality is that artistry is only a small element of creativity. It's much bigger. Looking around your room there and you look around my room here, everything that you can see has been created by people, by
Right.
human beings. That is creativity. We
Absolutely.
create the world we live in. So that's the first part. But having said that, artistry is a very good stepping stone into opening up the brain for creative thinking. Because, I did a workshop recently and I get people to paint a lemon and I show them how to do it. One woman said, I'm terrified of this. She was probably around 50, terrified, like picking up a paintbrush and painting a lemon because of when she was 14, someone told her that she was a crap artist, that she
Yeah.
couldn't paint.
Right.
And so we have these beliefs. So that's that thing. The second thing is creativity is misunderstood because we think it's relative. Okay. And it's not relative. And I tell a story. In 2001, I was had the honor of being shortlisted for the Archibald Prize in Australia, which is a famous prize that's been going for 150 years or something. One
Right.
of 31 out of 800 entries. And it was a bittersweet thing because it was a tribute to a friend of mine who'd passed away the year before. It was a double portrait and I had a photo of him. But after the announcement, spoiler alert, I didn't win. All the artists who knew each other, and I didn't, I was an outsider, they all went to the pub and I was there and they were drawing each other. I was so intimidated by them, I couldn't join in. Yet for a year, I'd been doing two portrait pencil sketches a day in preparation for this thing, and I was so intimidated. Yet here I was hanging in the Gallery of New South Wales next to all these famous artists. So I understand when people go, "Oh, I'm not going to do this because you're better than me."
Yeah.
But
Right.
creativity is not relative. Okay, so
But
they're the
that's an
things, and
important point, Paul. I mean, it's not relative. I mean, it's dynamic.
it's dynamic, yeah, but it's not. We can't compare. It's a desiderata. There are people
Yeah.
that are better and worse, or luckier and unluckier, and more talented, less talented. And all those things. People confuse, and I often confuse with being a good person. It just means that I have a talent.
Yeah.
It's good at it. Doesn't make me a better person. But I
Right.
think we attach sort of those sort of false values to it, but also we become intimidated. So when I do my workshops, I show my creative credentials. And, like I spent my life doing this, so they're pretty impressive. And then I say, so who's creative here? And nobody puts their hand up. But sometimes I don't give my creative credentials and no one still puts their hand up because they're with their peers. They don't be the person. But I have a really cool gift that I give people. So this person puts hand up, I throw them this really cool gift, and they go, "Oh my God, that's amazing." I say, "Thank you for the courage to put your hand up."
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is why it's really, it's to keep it alive, because I deal with a lot in my profession in medicine of doctors who are burnout,
Yeah,
mentally exhausted. And so my angle as a plastic surgeon, because everything in us is creative, you have a child born with a cleft lip and you got to think 20 years ahead how that child is going to look. And
yeah,
so
yeah,
there's no one that fits everything else. You just got to draw the whole thing out and, it's all creative thinking. But I look at it at an angle of how do we keep this brain alive, especially in the point of creativity, because it's always active, it's always dynamic, it's always thinking, it's always producing. And those ideas then have value. And when they go into the commercial world, they become innovation. You
yeah,
see,
yeah,
when you commercialize an idea, that's where innovation, I mean, that's the engine of growth, isn't it? So I want to come now slowly and move with you
yeah,
to creativity and innovation. These are the
yeah,
twin towers of production.
yeah. Okay. So, one of the things that I've learned over the last few years is this thing about we have two key drivers in our DNA. One is to be an individual, um, probably best parodied by Monty Python in The Life of Brian, where the whole crowd goes, "We're all individual," and they all say it in unison. Now, when someone says, "I'm not,"
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but we have this um, this strong desire to be a individual for individual expression. On the other hand, and it's often paradoxical and in conflict, we have the desire to, or the need to belong to a tribe, to a
Yeah.
team or a group. And so these are both, opposing things. And I rewatched recently, I don't know if you've ever seen the movie or the audience, The Gods Must Be Crazy, um,
Uh-huh.
about a Kalahari bush people, very insulated life. But anyway, I'll come back to that. So the thing is with those two things that over time, which one of those dominates depends a lot on the context. So
Absolutely.
in the context of something like, the Kalahari Bush people or the Australian Indigenous, where the environment is predictable and it's an environment of scarcity, the tribe dominates. Um,
Right.
and the example of the gods must be crazy is they have this very basic life with, simple tools, and someone flies over a plane and drops a Coke bottle
Yeah.
and they find this Coke bottle, and it becomes a thing of difference. And eventually, it starts destroying the tribe. So the guy's given the job to go and throw it off the edge of Earth.
Right. Right.
So that's an extreme version of it. But you know, so we end up with this very strong culture, which is what the team is. In times of uh, abundance, we have the individual dominates, which is, the society we live in now. Okay. It's all about me, 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 me. I don't need everyone else. It's just about me. So we have this thing where, the tribe diminishes. However, in times of great change, which we also live in, we need both. Um, and so we need the personal creativity to join with the creative culture that's built around a tribe for innovation. So, the personal, the ideas, to use a alliteration, the ideas live with the individual, but the innovation lives with the team or the tribe or the company, whatever it
Right.
might be.
Right.
And so, and where that connection lies is often in story, and historically that's what's been. Someone goes off to, or even with the bees, a bee goes find a whole lot of pollen, comes back and tells the story by a dance, go here, turn left, go right. With, with early peoples, even today, someone, tells their story, and that might then be, absorbed into the culture, and it becomes the legend or the myth, but it becomes part of the culture. Or if the tribe doesn't accept it, it's rejected. Back to, Galileo, those things. Here's an idea, it's rejected. But then we have other things where someone has an idea, it come and it's shared with the tribe, and it turns into innovation. one of the focuses I've been looking at more recently is having a thing about be extraordinary together, because the
Right.
reality is, you know, every idea that's ever existed has never come into existence by one single person. You know, it's always takes others. You know, and even as an artist, someone say, "Well, you know, you're doing drawing, no one's helping you." But even the pencil, if you've ever seen that little documentary, comes off the great speech, I Pencil. You
Hmm.
know, the technology that goes into a pencil from all around the world.
Right.
You know, the mining of the graphite. You know, the growing and milling of the timber and
Yeah.
the mining and chemical mixture for the
Yeah.
paint,
Yeah. Yeah.
and, you know, the building of the machinery, the iron that goes into it. You know, it's in like, and so here I am at the end, you know, the point of it, but I haven't done that alone. You know, like, okay, I could get a bit of charcoal and thing, but if I want to sell that, I've got to, even the paper I, you know, draw on, it's come from mills, you know, so
Yeah.
it is really, you know, creativity is a more than just a team sport. You know, it's a thing that connects us, and it's a thing that has allowed us to create the world that we live in.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, that's brilliant, Paul. I want to congratulate you on that. It's a journey, at the end of the day. But
Correct.
let me take you back to this point that you brought up because it's always action is always like forward going, forward looking. And I like your thoughts about the negative part of it, that the procrastination, because that will take you backwards or
Yeah, yeah,
stagnation.
yeah.
How does one get out of that sphere of procrastination and pick it in and have, or is there a spark moment that they realize what the hell is going on, man?
That's that's a great question. I had a chat recently with a fellow called James Victore, and
Right.
James is an amazing guy, and he wrote a book called Feck Perfection. So
Fact.
he Feck, Feck,
Uh-huh.
perfection, Pur. So he's transposed the E and the F. So it's
Right.
F, Feck Perfection.
Uh-huh.
And in the book, he says, you know, this is the book I wrote, you know, I needed for myself. And I didn't, you know, I thought, yeah, people say that. And I had a chat with him and I said, look, I'm really interested because he's a sort of a graphic artist, illustrator, and I love his work. And I said, how do you keep up, you know, this motivation and keep this work? And he went, I'm crap at it. He said, you know, I'm really good at showing other people how to do it. And and when I said I wrote this book for myself, I literally wrote this book. This is not the things that I do. These are the things I should be doing, you know, to get
Right.
it to get it.
Right.
So, so that's just the first point is that often we need a coach, you know, of some sort to help us, you know. And I've have a series of coaches and mentors, and I still do. I think it's complicated. I think that one of the key things, and again, it's a bit of a paradoxical thing. There are some artists that have successfully been able to do the opposite of this, which is just to have a really chaotic, messy studio, you know. Um, but most artists can't continue to do that. They finally get bogged down, you know, in the rubbish, and they can't see. But you know, there's a couple of famous artists who, you know, their photos of the studios that look like just, you know, the rubbish tip.
Right. Right.
But and I think one of the really, I think one of the really important things is to have uh, discipline and a routine, which again seems counter to this idea of you know, the creative free spirit. But that's got to link in with your own, you know, biorhythms of when you are better at doing one thing or the other.
Right.
So I write first thing in the morning, generally around 4:15 AM.
That's early.
It's early, yeah, but I need to because once I get distracted in my day, I cannot focus my mind. But I do a process, and I came across this by accident and then read this in a book called Rest, and I can't remember the author's name, but it's an
Uh-huh.
excellent book about the processes of the most famous creative people, you know, Darwin and all these people. And there was one person in there who talked about, there was a scientist who talked about this process where they would lie in bed as they're waking, and they'd wake slowly and have a conversation between their conscious and subconscious mind. And then they would, after about half an hour, get up and just write. And
Right.
I realized, a little bit like the three networks, that that's what I was doing. So I literally lie in bed for about half an hour in a dream, like in and out of dream, as I slowly wake up and write in my head. And then when I get up, it just flows. Okay.
Right.
Now, if I try to do that same thing in the afternoon, I can't do it. I just,
Sure.
I just, I just, it's like it's escaped me, you know. So for me, you know, that's a really critical thing. And I have other sort of rituals and routines that I need to follow, but that's the most important one
Okay,
because
hang on. Let me put a pause there. So at that, I mean, to me, listening to that, that's a very creative time when the creativity is kicking in. Your mind's in a state of coming up with some ideas, and you hope to make sure that that becomes productive later on. Which of the three networks that we talked about do you think is operating at that time?
I think what's happening is I think it's it's um it's a flow, you know. So whilst
Absolutely.
I'm
I was looking for
what
that word. It's a state of flow, isn't it?
it is, and so when I'm lying in there, because of the fact that I'm, you know, basically breaking into my subconscious, I, I'm night dreaming, like, you know, in terms of daydreaming, because I'm sort of semi-awake. So
Right,
I'm very much in that. The writing part is very much, you know, that old, you know, left-hand brain. And so when I'm, you know, I've almost stored that stuff in the default mode network, and then I use the executive control network and the mechanical process of typing to get that down on paper. Um,
right.
and then, you know, then the salient network kicked in, allows me, you know, to go back and forth, you know, and in a perfect world, not get too distracted, you know, started daydreaming somewhere, go else, so I'm going to write something else, whatever. Um, but the flow is, and that, you know, that is the critical part of the day for me. Some people are night people, a lot of artists, you know, like staying up all night and creating. That's really my time. But what I found lately is that, you know, whilst I write every day, I often never used to do anything with it, and I just sit there on my computer. So I've started a process now where I try to post every day with an illustration. So it forces me in a way to to edit, which I don't like doing and I'm not good at. But if I got a post, and that's a more pragmatic thing during the day, and what I do is, because I get quickly bored with that, I then flip from that to doing a watercolor and back and forth while it's drying. I'll come back because that is very fairly automatic for me because I've been done it for so long and it's relatively easy. But it still takes me a challenge of thinking, which is a
Right.
more sort of pragmatic thinking about what am I going to illustrate. You know, I need to find something to illustrate to somehow as an example or to support the idea. So it's a much more practical, you know, process that I go through that I can do when I'm more awake. But I'm not really trying to tap into that deep default mode network of, you know, coming up with creative thinking, you
Yeah,
know.
brilliant, brilliant, brilliant.
So yes, and I think, you know, that system might not work for another person. And I think the
Absolutely.
big thing is, you know, finding your own. You know, that is the really thing. But I think one thing, and that I read somewhere, someone else said, and, you know, and it's this thing about um uh create before you consume, you know. So, and I don't mean food, I mean, you know, if you, you know, start scrolling on Instagram,
Right.
uh it breaks the chain. You know, you will lose it. You know, you need to. I used to do a guided meditation before I'd write, but now I find it better just to go straight in. I put the kettle on, grab a cup of tea, sit straight back down, and just write. And it just flows. Not always, but generally it just flows. And it's when I wanted to be a writer and didn't understand to write, I'd sit and write, you know, and it doesn't come up. Now, having said that, you know,
Yeah.
because I'm writing more and more, I can at various times. You know, if I've got a deadline, I will write at other times in the day. But that's my peak creative state, very early in the morning when the house is quiet. You know, the dog's not ready to go for a walk. The gym's not open. I just can get this done. You know, and that's for me. So, that's what I encourage people. I think you need to have you need to experiment to find when you can step in and out of your creativity. And just one last point on that before we go on is that when you talk about we're not all creative or whatever it might be, the reality is that a lot of the great scientists were violin players or piano players.
Yeah.
That I believe that as a stepping stone into greater application of creativity in life and business, everyone should have some sort of creative hobby. Um, I have one client, an old friend. She does extreme knitting, and she has 6 foot long knitting needles, and knits with almost like a rope. So she gets a workout while she's doing it as well.
Right.
And I make no judgment. My accountant all through my career was also a good friend. He was a bushy, and so he used to do welding of found objects and sculptures. But when he retired, he became a photographer. And he's a brilliant photographer now, And that's another thing about people when they transition out of the work. But
Yeah.
I believe that everyone, whether it's music, macrame, calligraphy,
Right.
you know, making beads, like it doesn't matter what it is, some sort of creative hobby or pastime I think, is great for the soul, and it helps build our creative confidence, which we then can apply in
Yeah.
our life businesses.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a golden thread, isn't it, from past, present, and future that keeps it all in a storyline.
Correct,
And your
correct.
your story, your script is all written. That's the thread that goes all the way through. And I think
I,
those who snap that thread are the ones who give up and go into depression. I always talk about mental wealth as
yeah, yeah,
opposed to mental health.
yeah,
You see,
yeah,
and as doctors, let me share this with you, Paul, and I'd like your insights on it because as doctors, we have a fixed mindset. We go to work, we come back. We go to work, we come back. It's like a TikTok machine that's just going up and down. And and you're working within that sphere of creativity or whatever you're trained to do. So I'm writing a process of finishing up this book on MindFlow Ergonomics, which I believe very strongly that, I put it into 7 zones, Paul, where they can flow in at any one time and then use it. And that keeps you really on the cutting edge because ergonomics is the natural laws of work to prevent you from burning out, like an ergonomic chair, or,
yeah,
it just
yeah,
keeps
correct.
it fit. And it starts with creativity. And then it flows into what's called resplendence, that dazzling moment, that spark that keeps the whole thing going. So there's certain times of the day where it can just happen. And then
Yeah,
from the R, it goes to E, which is emotional. And I'm a very spiritual guy. And I believe that all of us have a spirit, man, that needs
yeah,
to be fed. We talk about that life work balance. You can't
yeah,
have a balance if there's no fulcrum. And
yeah,
so I
yeah,
believe that the fulcrum is your spirit, man, that keeps the
yeah,
whole thing in balance, you see. So that's the E. And then the A is the awareness, like you said, observation, being aware of where you are, being mindful. And in that moment, you can start getting different zones working. And then
yeah,
from there, it goes to T, which is tolerance. And then I is intentionality. We got to make it work. You want to make sure that your work is successful.
yeah,
Okay. And then it goes into V, which is the visioneering, which is the engine that drives the whole process. And
yeah,
ultimately, E is ergonomics. So I've got these 7 zones to try and create this high performance in the working place without burning out.
yeah, yeah,
And you can tap into all these zones at any one time to keep it really creatively, positive at the end of the day. So I came up with this thing called the Chi transformation factor, which is
yeah,
creativity, all right,
yeah,
the currency of the 21st century, and then H is hope. If you don't have hope of the future in the present, you burn out.
yeah,
And when you have both these elements, that's where innovation comes in. So you're always thinking and processing and becoming productive. So I find that seems to be a point of a different angle of creativity. How do we keep the well-being alive, longevity alive, so that we're all the time excited about life?
mm-hmm. Yeah, look, I think it sounds like a great model, and I think you're right, that whole idea of mental wellness. Um, I really, what struck me in there was a couple of things. One was that idea of hope in the middle. I had a friend who passed away a couple of years ago from a brain tumor, and he was an ideas person, always lived in the future. And once he got the diagnosis, he said, I've just got to live in the present now. I can't, I can't, and it's interesting. And for him, it was, a double-edged sword. It was negative in a way because, he loved ideas and loved thinking about the future.
Right.
But on the positive side, it really put him in the moment, it put him, and which again is, I think that without a, diagnosis like that, we don't get polarized. So we have to have that constant balance.
Yes, yes,
And it
absolutely.
it reminds me a bit of in Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. Sorry, she talks about this thing about the Greeks, had the genius, and the genius was like a guardian angel, but it sort of did two things. When you had a success, you shared that with the genius. It just wasn't you. It was like, it was to diminish the ego. It's not just me, it's also my genius. But on the flip side, if you failed, well, it wasn't all your fault. The genius didn't show up, you know, which is where so it's that sort of thing about the part of the balance, and she in that book she also talks about this story about this poet who used to literally feel the ideas sort of flow through her. And there's this story where this woman was in the garden, and she felt this like ideas coming through, and she raced in the house to get a piece of paper, and she's describing it that it's gone, and she's pulling it back, and she's
Right.
written it down literally backwards. You know,
Really?
yeah, so that's the story in the book, and this woman, who is this famous poet, so it's so visceral, about this thing that it was there, and she was just, she pulled it back in onto the paper, but it went back, it went down backwards.
Absolutely. I mean, it's fantastic. I mean, listening to you and hearing the different angles of creativity, it adds so much of meaning and purpose to life, isn't it, Paul? When
Correct.
you're on that edge of creativity, you're always thinking and never afraid to bring an idea out into the public, into the world, you know.
Yeah, look, I think we're always afraid at some stage. One of the words that I use is frisson, which is a
Uh-huh.
French word. And frisson is that knife edge between fear and excitement, and they say it's when the hairs of your neck, stand on end, and it might be when you're just about to, start off on a roller coaster.
Right.
And I think that's the state we need to be in because, if we just get ahead of ourselves and just excitement, we can lose focus. But
Yeah.
if we flip back to the fear, then we become paralyzed. So it's that thing of that, to live in that state of frisson,
Yeah.
where it's just, you know, my friend who passed away used to say it's like it's on the edge of potential,
Oh,
like
nice.
anything could, untapped potential, but constantly on the edge of it, almost like it's a big water balloon, and we can feel it's right there, and it's
Yeah,
always
yeah.
accessible
I
to
mean,
us.
brilliant. I love that. I love that point because, you're always, like I said, thinking about the future in the present or what you're going to be. And I want to end with this empowerment of the future you. And you've been in years in this whole world of creativity. It reminds me of a rabbi who wrote these words, The Power of Self. And he says, if you're not going to be better tomorrow than you were today, then what need have you for tomorrow? which gets you thinking that every moment counts.
Yeah.
And you can always rely on creativity to keep that pulse on, isn't it? Your thoughts on that, the future of
Yeah.
you.
Well, listen, I look a great thing to finish on. Um, One thing is there's a fellow we had on the podcast called Lenny Ravish. He's a Jewish guy from Israel. He's 88 and he's
Right.
still working. He's a comedian. He's hilarious. And I did a post about him and his business partner recently, and he put a line in. He said, "Paul, we both have we both have brilliant futures in our past."
Uh-huh.
which is around that idea.
Uh-huh.
I think the thing is that just back to that time frame and leaving alone away the indigenous fourth time dimension, which I really want to play with.
Right.
The model I have looks at the past, present, and in the future I call about possibility. And the past is where our stories live. The, the present is where we can get clear about what's important, and the possibility is where our ideas live. And our ideas are things that we can add value or make a difference, and they become our future, our future present.
Right.
I think that the big thing is that to know, and it's probably one of the hardest things, that when we're creating something, and looking for the future, it's not going to change who we are, So, it's we're still going to be the same person. Um, and I think so often when I'm in the future, I'm going to be a better artist or a better writer. It's not going to change the essence of who I am. And I think that's a mistake that we make, and I think that if you see, people that have had great successes, which because it's all transient, but it doesn't fulfill. Um, and so I think that if we're looking to the act of creativity to somehow think it's going to make us a better person, then that's ill-founded. We need to enjoy it for the sheer joy of doing it, knowing that whatever we create, it's not going to, we're still going to be the same person. We're still going to have the same insecurities. We can still all that stuff like that. It's not going to change us. And I think that's really important because I think in so many people, especially with the proliferation of social media, we see other people that have these successes and their life appears to be different. But as
Right.
you know, you've obviously talked to a lot of people on your podcast. We're all still the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're just ordinary people that maybe can do extraordinary things. So I think that and the other point that comes to mind when you ask me that question is that you know I'm very grateful that I've been given uh, the opportunities I've been given and the series of talents I've been given. That basically we can do anything we want, but we can't do it all. So
Absolutely.
it's just creativity, and then the third point of that I think is around conscious creativity. Just because we can create it doesn't mean we should, you know. And maybe that's a question that hangs over AI. It's certainly a question that hangs over many things that have been created that bring destruction to our world. But I suppose it's like creativity for good. Just because we can, it doesn't mean we should. So,
Right. I
so
think
they're
that's
the sort of 3 points that I think about in terms of a future self, which is really about ideas being where we can add value and make a difference. The whole idea that is no matter what we create, it's not going to really change us. It's who the real essence of who we are. And then lastly, to practice conscious creativity. Um, is this something that's going to be good for the world?
absolutely. Well, that's a perfect place to end. Conscious creativity what does it matter to the whole world? I mean, are you going to make a difference?
Yeah,
And
correct.
I think that's a perfect way of an artist ending a painting when he does the last stroke and say, "That's it."
I got two tips for the budding artist. I know we pull a shut. One is, especially when you're doing art, knowing when to stop.
Right.
That's a really hard thing to do, knowing when to stop. And the other is, once you've done a piece of art, stick in a frame. It will make it look at least twice as good, if
Uh,
not. And when I do my processes and I get people to show them how to do a watercolor of lemon, I secretly frame it during the morning tea break, and then I do a big reveal, and they just blown away. So they're the two tips for making better art.
yeah.
Um, Frame it
Frame it.
and know when to stop.
Way to stop. Well, that's it. Well, thank you, Paul, for joining me on HEARTtalk. This has been a terrific conversation. And for those of you who have watched, if you love this podcast, subscribe, like it, and stay in touch with Paul Fairweather You can get him on LinkedIn. You can listen to all and read all his articles up there. And I can tell you, your life can change if creativity is at the pulse of it. And so once again, thank you for watching us and joining us on HEARTtalk.
Thank you for having me, Charles. It's been a really good fun.
My pleasure.